Amanda for Philo Ventures. We're very excited to be bringing a lot of those women's programming here to Utah Tech Week this year. At Philo Ventures, we are a venture studio, a venture fund, and we also do real estate investments. But we build businesses and we back founders, and we know that the key to innovation is who's in the room. So this is one of the most important conversations we believe happening at Utah Tech Week. And so we teamed up with one of the most influential women in Utah, Melanie. Melanie is the CEO of the Women's Leadership Institute. I'm so excited for her to tell you all about that. I'm also the former editor-in-chief of Utah Business Magazine, and she's put together this phenomenal panel, and we're so grateful to have them here. So thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you to Utah Tech Week and Trent Mano for putting us on the main stage, and thank you to Philo Ventures for supporting this work. I'm going to now hand it over to Melanie. Melanie, thank you for everything. Thank you for putting this together. We're so good. I'm going to know. Thank you.
To echo everything Amanda just said, thank you to Philo Ventures and to Utah Tech Week. Thank you to Kiln for hosting us in this space. And thanks to all of you. There are, 40,000 events happening this week. So I appreciate that you blocked out some time to share with us. I'm going to start with a promise. By the end of this panel, everyone will leave with at least one move that they can make differently. Whether you're aiming for a seat yourself, or sponsoring someone into one of these decision-making roles, or making decisions in the room about what gets funded. Over the last several months, the women in the, I know the name of my company, the Women's Leadership Institute has been conducting a research project. We have interviewed CEOs and executive women from across the state. We have had focus groups. We have done surveys. And the question was this: how do we move more women into the C-suite? How do we have more representation in rooms where women's perspectives are not being considered? And we have learned that advancement into these roles is not about being more confident. It's not about being more qualified, but it's about understanding how power is allocated and recognized on showing up in ways that reduce perceived risk. So in this panel, we're going to decode those pathways, talk about how deals get backed, how boards get built, and how executives build trust. We're going to be honest about what works and what doesn't. And we're going to talk about things that people don't usually say out loud in settings like this, but they shared with us during our research process. So I'd love to start with intros from everybody on the panel. I'm going to have them each say their names, name their seat, and the gate that they understand best when it comes to elevating women in leadership.
Hello, my name is this on? Can you hear me? Okay. Hi, guys. My name is Dr. Chelsea Shields. I am the founder of Brandthropologie Agency. It's a human-centered research and brand strategy where we really focus on understanding the audience and what they think and perceive. And so we can make our adjustments from there.
Hi, I'm Isom. I'm Chief Corporate Affairs Officer for Clyde Companies. The gate I understand best, is that what you said?
I didn't answer that.
I'm not sure.
Probably board seats, right?
Board seats, C-suite, probably. Yeah, workhorse, that's what I am. Okay.
Nate Callister, President CEO of Zions as of 4 weeks ago. So really new to this role. Thank you. And I've been in banking for 25 years, so I would say the gate for me, which may be a little bit unique, is I've been at huge banks. I was at Wells Fargo for 20 years in senior leadership positions there. I was at a really small bank that I helped start and was in a senior leadership position there. And then I'd call it a regional bank, right? Well known to everyone here in Zions Bank. I've only been there 7 months, like I said, only 4 weeks, but have a lot of insight into over the years of just how people progress, who ends up in talent pipelines, and how they move up in talent pipelines in big, small, and medium-sized businesses.
I'm Kat Kennedy. I'm a general partner at Kickstart Fund, a seed stage fund focused on the Mountain West in Cottonwood Heights is where our office is. And what that means, if you're like, what's a general partner? You're not alone. No one knows what it is. I get alongside my partners, we get to decide who receives capital, and then I sit board. So the gate that I understand the most is probably raising capital, deploying capital, and then board composition.
I'm Sunny Washington. I'm the CEO and co-founder of OrcaPanda. What we do is we help brands understand how AI talks about them, and so their marketing presentation according to AI. I have done tech startups, some successful, some not so much. So I probably understand that landscape of starting from scratch and then growing and scaling a company out to exit.
Thank you all. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to start the first question with Chelsea. Chelsea was the lead researcher for us on this project we've been conducting over the past quarter. So I'd love to ask, when people talk about pipeline, what are they getting wrong or misunderstanding?
So forgive my notes, but I want to make sure I get the research right. One of the main findings, if we had to summarize it all down, is that there are some invisible rules to governing and hiring and promotion that aren't being explicitly communicated or explicitly trained on. And often people, women and men, who are not socialized in those systems and know what is expected, show up and are, prevented from getting that job, or it's undermining them without ever knowing those skills were required in the first place. So that's trying to summarize 145 interviews, okay? So we'll get into some specifics here about what that means. But CEOs across multiple industries and multiple research methodologies kept saying the same things. First thing they said is that high-stake roles require a higher level of trust and a different leadership skill set than early career promotion, but that expectation is never necessarily explicitly stated or said in a job description. A job description might look the same for a C-suite role and a managerial role, and yet that C-suite role is required to have these additional undefined leadership skills and have a higher level of trust. The next thing that's never really talked about, but that high-level decisions are governed by, is these 4 things. The first one is familiarity. Are you a culture fit? Are you easy to talk to? Can you get along cohesively and seamlessly with our company? People make those judgments on the spot, and how do you prepare for that, or how do I know what you're expecting there? The second one is capability. Can I trust you? Are you dependable? Are you reliable? Again, people are making a lot of those judgments beyond the resume. The third one is, again, fit into our culture, seamlessness, communication, collaboration, teamwork, and the last one is perceived risk. Can you represent our company when the stakes are high? And are you a risk that we are willing to take? So those are kind of those high level things. And then the last thing I'll say, and I'll try to sum it up quickly, is that CEO after CEO after CEO kept bringing up this concept, and they said it in different ways, each one in a different way, and that should tell you something. But it was this idea of executive readiness. So I'll give you a quote from a top CEO, and then I'll give you some statistics on what that means, perceived readiness. But here's the quote. We are open to women in the C-suite, but we expect candidates to arrive already fluent in how to execute executive leadership. If they aren't, that's a readiness issue. It's not a bias issue. And some of the things they mean by readiness, and I'll just say them pretty quick, are things like leadership presence, confident communication, emotional intelligence, collaborative personality, people skills, and other qualities like accountability, decisiveness, transparency, and initiative. So I would just say, in summary, there's a lot of these explicit expectations that we need to be more aware of and train on.
Thank you, Chelsea. In one of these interviews that I conducted, we did ask a question across all the methodologies. Have you ever rescinded a C-suite job offer after you'd already extended it? Is there anything that somebody could do to have that job offer rescinded? I expected the answer to be no, because by the time you're already in that process, you've kind of fallen in love with the candidate. And it was somebody half said yes, that they had. I was expecting to say, go in, negotiate, it's all going to be fine. But actually, there are things that you can do wrong. And most of those things attach to the culture of the organization. So one CEO rescinded a job offer because in the final negotiation, the person said, "Will I have a numbered in reserve parking stall?" And the CEO said, "That signaled to me that that person was a hierarchical personality, and that's not our culture." So that was really interesting to me. Nate, I'd love to get your feedback on how organizations actually interpret pipeline and what it has meant to you in the banks that you have worked with.
Yeah. First of all, I didn't say at the beginning, but thanks for hosting this and having such an important conversation and including me in this. I appreciate that. Yeah, every organization I've been at where I've been involved in talent pipeline discussions, including Zion's, is it's a combination of looking at, and I think a lot of the stuff you touched upon nails it, but it's a combination of looking at grading them on an axis of kind of actual performance, right? So how good a performer are they today? But more importantly, on the same kind of framework is what is their leadership potential, right? What is their ceiling, right? So are they a low performer today, high performer, right? And you can have a high performer with low potential from a leadership perspective that kind of gets stagnant. And so the most important thing that we try to convey to people is obviously being a high performer is super important, but the most important thing as we look at talent pipeline is, are you a perceived high performer, or excuse me, high potential, right? And I think a lot of that stuff that Kat talked about nailed it is, what are those, soft skills, emotional intelligence? Are they a cultural fit, right? Are they a complementary fit to the skill set that we're looking for? What type of resilience do they have? Have they demonstrated that? Communication skills, poise, do they have other people in the organization? Or we also have, I would say also that we'll have a deep internal pipeline that we look at, and we also have an external talent pipeline, right? So every one of our leaders, we want to make sure that they have a succession plan, and that could be internal. It could be a combination of people they've identified externally as well, and we can talk about that later in terms of what we look at that. But what we try to reiterate with our team is actual performance is super important, but maybe even more important than that is what is their perceived potential and ceiling.
Thank you, Nate. A follow-up question for anybody. If it's not just pipeline, what are you seeing in your various roles? Selection, sponsorship, risk, or something else that is keeping people out of the C-suite?
I'll answer that. I think sometimes the challenge is that there's one woman in the pool, and she's seen as a risky outlier because she's so much different than the other potential candidates. So one of the things we can do is get more women in the pipeline so that that single woman doesn't have the weight of the world on her shoulders to represent half the population. But I honestly think women sometimes overrate themselves and overthink it a little much, and the best thing you can do if you're that one woman is just be true to who you are.
Yeah, I loved hearing the answers from the research. And I hope you heard the undercurrent that I heard. Maybe you heard it something different. But what I heard is it's not something that can easily be engineered. Often we'll go into a process and think, if I have, these qualifications and I'm in this room and I can check boxes and therefore I deserve. That's not usually how these level of decisions are made. How they're made are, do people want to work with you? How good are you at reading the room? Your EQ often matters more than your IQ in most of these roles, right? Because if you have great EQ, I think everyone believes that the sky is the limit for you. And so the number one thing I do, the advice that I give when women ask me, how do I get there? It's be really, really good at reading a room and hearing what the message is underneath the message. Because if you can be the translator for what's actually going on in any room, I think executive roles will come quite easy to you.
If I could just add one thing on the emotional intelligence, the importance of that. I think the technical skills, whether it's accounting, engineering, coding, all these things, those are still important. But I think especially as we move into this artificial intelligence age where a lot of that will be replaced or supplemented. I try to underscore with my team, with my kids, like the absolute importance of learning those interpersonal skills of, like you said, reading the room, regulating your emotions, understanding other people's emotions, how to communicate to each other, how to relate, how to collaborate. Like, to me, those are the absolute essential skills today, but especially going forward, and especially if you want to be in a leadership role.
You've reminded me of something, Nate. I'm going to put you on the spot. And I know this about Zions, but it predates you, that when someone is being considered for the C-suite, they start popping them around in different departments, having them manage the IT team and then the marketing team and then the engineering team. Like, they don't have the vertical expertise. So talk to us about that if you've seen it before. And if you haven't, just shut me down and maybe somebody else.
That's a great. I haven't. I'm certainly aware of it. And what I would say, what I love about that is the way Zions looks at it, and I think a lot of businesses, or they should, is, to your point, is giving people a diversity of touch points. And so, for example, if we're looking to hire a head of HR or IT, right, it's important that they have that IT skill, but the most important thing is, right, as how they work with other people, the feedback, right? So to your point, as you rotate that potential leader throughout the bank, right, what are the other organizations saying about that individual in terms of their willingness to learn, their humility, all those types of data points, right, as we make leadership decisions. And so that's a great observation.
Tour. Cat. Why did you look so afraid? We're friends. As you're considering whether to lean in on a founder or a deal, what changes a maybe into a heck yeah?
It depends. So many things do. She sent these questions ahead of time, and I really sat and thought about this one, trying to find a punchy answer, and there just wasn't one. But I think that there's beauty in that every conversation that we have as investors is very, very fluid. And I'm always a maybe in every conversation. What pushes me to a yes could be a market that I'm deeply passionate about, the infectious passion of a founder and them telling me about the market that they're building to, a market shift, a tidal shift like we have right now with AI, right? So many things can be happening every single day. And I share that context because you get a lot of no's as you're out raising capital. Most of what you're going to be told is no. The yeses are very rare, especially if you're raising from venture capitalists. The very nature of that asset class is it is finite and small, and it is for the riskiest and therefore hopefully the largest of outcomes, right? So most people we're going to have to say no to. But that no could shift to a yes, even from the same investor, just a week later. And so I would say always be looking for what could shift in the room, what could shift in the environment outside of you, and be as authentic and honest as you can within that shift. What I'm always looking for, first and foremost, in every founder that I'm lucky to back, is integrity and authenticity, and last but not least, like deep, deep passion for the space that they're building towards. So yeah, it depends is my favorite answer to every question.
Thank you, Kat. Sunny, let's have you jump on from the founder perspective. What things have
Kat's told me no, so.
Perfect case study right here. Let's talk about things that you have done or said or worked on that you have felt resonate with a funder versus things that you wish you could do over again.
I mean, listen, Kat's right. It depends. You're going to walk into a room and you're going to have a pitch and it's going to come across, in whatever way you try and position yourself, and you could have all the right metrics and the prettiest deck and the right messaging and all of that. But what you don't understand is maybe what's happening on the other side, which is their fund dynamics, maybe political, like who is able to influence a decision. Maybe there's some bad experience that they've had with this market that you've been in that is influencing this, or some weird headline, or they don't understand the market, so they don't get that excited. So I think like the challenge is, I've probably had hundreds of investor meetings over the years, and it's the worst thing in the world. Like, I love Kat, but listen, I'll meet with her as a friend, but I don't love pitching. It's exhausting because you do get a lot of rejection. And I think the things where like my mental health has suffered is where I tried to adapt to what I thought they wanted to see, which was inauthentic to myself. And maybe I'm just like over 40 and tired, but I don't care anymore. I'm not going to pretend to be like, I'm not going to walk in with a hoodie and like, pretend like I'm, Zuck's little brother or sister or whatever, right? I'm not doing that anymore because that is not true to myself. And so when I have done best and when I've connected the best with investors, it's when could come across and I could convince them that what we were doing was exciting or they were really excited just to back me because they liked me for who I was or who I am. So I think the thing that you have to do is like look for those signals, but just recognize that there are going to be things that are completely outside of your control. How they perceive you, whatever biases they have or experiences or things like that. Don't try and change those things, only change what you can control.
Thank you, Sunny. I'm going to take a quick pause. For those in the back, we have a seat here on the front, a seat by Nicole, raise your hand, a seat behind Jen, and a seat here on row 3. If anyone would like to get off of your feet.
We have two more seats up here, guys. Very good. Yeah. 3 more. Here's a good answer. Yeah. To come here.
Yeah. Thanks for making this standing room only. How cool is this? Love that you're all here for this conversation. The next question is for Allie. Many people who are trying to elevate in their roles in this community don't have access to the right networks or to the right funders. What are the actual moves that could help someone become visible and trusted by people with power before there is even a formal opportunity?
I think there are 2 fronts, and everybody's so aware of the social networks. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on social media. What they see on social media should reinforce what they know to be true in person, though. Don't contrive something that's not who you really are on a social platform would be my advice. But the next piece is really show up in person. And I mean show up in ways where you're passionate about, but show up and volunteer. In my experience in both political networks and in nonprofit work, I've made some of the best and richest connections working side by side with people with similar passion. And those folks who know your heart and your mind and your work ethic and your perspective, and you let your guard down when you're at a United Way event and you roll up your sleeves and you're painting together. There's ways to connect that are meaningful. The WLI board, which is a great board of men and women, I've met tremendous men there who otherwise I probably wouldn't have any contact with. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to serve in committees and in nonprofits when you can rub elbows with people that you normally wouldn't. Politics, that's a mixed bag, enter at your own risk. But so important, we need good people to step up and get involved civically in lots of ways.
Sunny, I'm going to turn to you. You had a non-traditional path. What worked on your path for making these connections and getting into the space that you found yourself?
So I have ADHD, and I think my superpower is like remembering a random fact about someone. Like it could have been 20 years ago, but we had a conversation or whatever. And I didn't realize I do this naturally, but for me, I'd go and meet someone and I could immediately spout off a story about this person. And that, like for me, has worked in order to build authenticity. But, you all start from somewhere. And I think that, I didn't come in with like this pedigree and this network and all of that, but it took 20 plus years to build this thing. And now is like one of the most cherished things. Like I can literally never leave Utah because I'm not doing this over again. But I think that when you go out and like, just like what Allie was saying, go out and meet with people and talk to them, like truly connect with them. Don't make it transactional. Like it is so obvious when like I see someone and they're looking for the most important person in the room and like asking you your title, and then they'll decide, if they'll sit down and talk with you. Don't be that person. I think, like, if you're going to commit to wanting to build a network, like, that is a living thing, and you should constantly be working at it. But I think you will find, like, the best relationships, and you'll never know, like, whatever random connection that I remember where I'll be like, oh, I do know someone who does X, Y, Z, and making those connections for other people. I think that like, I'm very grateful that I have that superpower. I guess it's a superpower. I think some people find it annoying, but I do think that there's incredible, like, you look at Utah, the fact that we have 2 conferences the same week, but we're doing this thing, and we all come together, and so you should walk away meeting people and connecting with them and, like, really trying to get to know them. I think there's so much power in just, I think, like, being friendly and kind.
Can I punctuate the transactional piece of what you just said? Because I think it implodes so quickly when relationships are only transactional. Everybody's got radar. We know when it happens, and it falls apart quickly.
Nate, when you are working on filling a VP vacancy or a C-suite vacancy, what could somebody do that would signal trust for you, that would make them trustworthy for one of these open roles?
Yeah, so I think there's a handful of things, but I think those individuals who are humble and willing to admit where they made mistakes, they have that self-awareness. When I see that, and because we all make mistakes, we kind of have that growth mindset of where, like, hey, this didn't go well, and they kind of own it. To me, that builds a ton of trust. I think consistency through turmoil and down, it doesn't mean they have to, they can show emotion. I don't mind that, but as someone that can handle challenges and show that consistency through challenges, to me, demonstrates trust. And then for me, another big one is someone that can think beyond their silo or their individual team or their individual performance. So when you have discussions with them and you're talking about bigger changes, and you can see that they're thinking, like, okay, this may negatively impact my team, but it's the right thing for the enterprise, and they're willing to voice that and be part of that. To me, that garners trust, that they're trying to do the right thing and they're not just thinking transactionally or selfishly.
Thank you. As Chelsea was mentioning at the beginning, a lot of these decisions are about risk management. Who is a risky person to put in this role versus who is a safe person to put in this role? So you want somebody that you trust. And it was interesting, one of our questions that we asked in the interviews was, would you ever hire somebody who had a non-traditional resume that didn't check all of the boxes perfectly? And if so, what is that person bringing to the role that's so valuable you're willing to overlook the check boxes? And this one CEO told me proof that they have endured something or that they're resilient, as Nate said. I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, if they're a military veteran, Lisa in the house. Thank you for your service, he said. If they are an Ironman triathlete, if they have beat cancer, and he just started listing off all these things. That's like, if they have overcome, if they have endured, then that would be something that would push me to consider them. And another CEO, she said, if they have been successful before, if I've seen them in other roles, even if it was an unrelated vertical, if they've been successful at that, they'll probably be successful at this. So I thought that was really interesting too. Kat, I'm going to kick it over to you. How are signals sometimes received in a pitch versus how you think the founder intends you to view them?
Authenticity has been a word said quite a few times today. Often people will come in and pitch, and it's like they're putting on a play. And it's like, who are you, though? Like, because there's even a tone of voice that people will shift into. Like, when it changes from, hi, I'm Kat, nice to meet you, what's your name? And then they're like, and they go on. I'm like, okay, stop. I just want to have a conversation with you. And so that often shifts. And really what I'm trying to do is understand those founders on a human level to extract the little nuggets like have been cited from the research, which is, can they do hard things? Can they recruit a team? Are they resilient? And if you go into pure storytelling, I'm up on a pulpit mode, it's so hard for me to get to know you as a human. And I can go on and on and on about advice on Twitter about how to raise from VCs. Like, most of it is just so wrong. Ultimately, what you're trying to do is build rapport and relationship and connect. And through that, you get to tell a story. But if you're just trying to get through a pitch with a bunch of checkboxes, like, I'm so bored, I'm so sorry, I have ADD too, and I'm going to check out so fast and be going through a to-do list in my mind, which is not great of me, but it is honest. And so what I'm looking for is, who are you? Show me who you are. And I think we're going to be able to have a much richer conversation and a deeper analysis of the opportunity, and if Kickstart is the right fit, if we're engaging on a human level.
Thank you, Kat. Allie, you mentioned that boards are a great way to expand your network, serving on boards. How do board appointments actually happen? And how can somebody make a move to get one of those seats? Who initiates? How is the decision made? Can you talk about that?
Sure. I can only speak to my experience. One great avenue is on the governor's website. There's a list of about 400 boards and commissions statewide, and it's posted when things are open and when terms end. So if you find some area where you're passionate or your technical expertise is relevant, you can identify who chairs that board right now, learn more about that board from that person, find out who in the governor's office controls that appointment, and determine in the landscape if you've got allies and advocates that can help you land that role. Sometimes it's writing a really great application letter. Sometimes it's having the right people speak for you and with you. So there are different scenarios. I think for me, invitations have come from various sectors because they've seen me. I mentioned the volunteer experience, but they may have seen me working on a project in the community, volunteering, even, as simple things like the PTA. I built a relationship early on with Trustlands, and that was a great networking opportunity in a larger picture with legislators and other voices in the public policy arena. So I think the way to get onto boards varies depending on the board. So often, like a nonprofit will have advisory teams or policy-making teams or volunteer opportunities. So if you look at the Salt Lake Chamber, for example, you can serve in lots of ways in the community as a volunteer and network there, and then build your understanding of how their board system works and receive an invitation, or ask for an invitation to participate in various ways. That's just one example. I think chambers are a great way to network, by the way, and maybe underutilized by younger generations, and they could use some fresh blood.
We've got two, you heard the applause. We've got two.
From the over 50 crowd.
Chamber West and Chamber West Jordan Chamber of Commerce up here.
Yeah, I think the chambers are fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. Chelsea, from the research, what makes someone board safe?
So we were not surprised that both the CEO group and the female executive group across all the research said how important social networks are. We've all said it as well. What we were surprised about is when we dug deeper. They did not care about social media. In fact, for many, it could have been detrimental. They did not care about networking events or business cards. Ultimately, what they were talking about with a social network is, can someone else vouch for you when your name comes up? That's it. And so it's a harder path to follow, and I think these guys have given great examples. Join a volunteer, join a commerce, join an industry-wide thing. But there's also this other element of your own personal brand recognition. So do you have thought leadership that's tied to your professional expertise or skills? Are you known in your industry? There is that. It's better if the person knows you in the room and can speak positively about you when you're not there. but is your name recognized and someone else can say something about you that's relevant to this when you're not there? And that's ultimately, when we dug deeper, what people were looking for. And then we also found out some very interesting stats because we wanted to know, well, measure how important is this. So 80% of our CEOs said that they have hired someone who was socially or professionally or personally connected to someone at the company. And then we broke it down even further. We asked, how often in your career do you hire someone that's socially connected to you or someone at the company? And the highest rate was 65% of CEOs said it happens 80% of the time. 11% said it happens 100% of the time, and they only hire someone who can personally vouch for them. And then the numbers go down from there, but not one CEO we ever talked to, it was lower than 40% of the time. So I just want to reiterate how important it is, not just that you're networking and being transactional. I think it is that authentic point of view getting out into the world and those authentic connections where people understand what skill set you're bringing to the table.
Thank you, Chelsea. And Sunny, what does mentorship versus sponsorship look like in the real world?
I don't know. So I'm just gonna give you my honest take here. So I have had people come and say, will you be my mentor? And I was like, I don't know what that means, what is required. And I joined Women Who Succeed, and they had a structured mentorship program where you got paired with female college graduates in STEM, and it was a wonderful experience. I only did it 1 year just because of time constraints, but that was very intentional mentorship. So in my mind, it is a little bit more structured, where you're actually actively trying to teach them something or give them experience to something. For sponsorship, I would put that in the, when I can advocate for this person or look out for this person, then I'm going to speak highly of them, or I'm going to invite them into a room or a meeting or an experience or an event that I think they should be at, because I think, number one, they could add value, or number two, it would be good for them to get that experience. And if I don't do it, it might not be on their radar, or they wouldn't get invited. So that's the way I look at it. I would have said, I've never formally had a mentor, but I've had people who have I've had mentorship experience, and they've all actually mostly been men. Growing up in my career, it was only men that there weren't a lot of women that I could have. But I think that one of the things in my old age now is I like to, just this week with Utah Tech Week, my daughter's boyfriend, and that's a whole nother thing. But he's a student at the U, and I was like, hey, you should come to Utah Tech Week. And there's these events that I think that you might really enjoy, because I know he's going to be looking for an internship. I think of that being as a form of just not necessarily sponsorship where I go with him or anything, but just making him aware, because I am thinking of him. I want him to have those opportunities. So if you can actively do that for others, I guarantee people will do it for you. Because once you've done that favor, someone will return it. So I think we should all be sponsoring each other. That's just me, though.
So in my last role, me and the head of sales were constantly butting heads, and I have an executive coach. He connected me with, she is a C-suite executive at Exxon. And I was talking to her, trying to get some mentorship from her. And she said, Kat, I have a spreadsheet of the people in my life who I know are influential. And on that spreadsheet, I say, are they a detractor when I'm not in the room? Do they speak ill of me? Are they just Are they passive, or are they a promoter? And she said, throughout my career, I am actively trying to move the detractors at least into passives, and the passives into promoters. Right? I hear sponsorship, and I think, if I'm not in the room, what are they saying of me? And does that increase the opportunities that are available to me, or does it decrease? And inherently, by nature of humans, we cannot be transactional for people to be promoters of us in the rooms that we are not in, right? And so if you're an engineering nerd like me, and you've got to have a spreadsheet and be like, does this person like me? Do they not like me? Or do they really like me, right? like, do what you got to do. But, you know, what that did is it changed my behavior. I was more thoughtful and like, why doesn't this person like me? Like, let's have a heart to heart. Let's figure out what I'm doing that you're getting a bad taste in your mouth, right? I'm able to more authentically engage with those humans. And at the end of the day, that's what matters as you are growing through your career. So yeah, I've got a spreadsheet, and I will review that spreadsheet, and I'll be like, well, what can I do? What can I do for this person? How can we have better rapport?
But you definitely have, like...
I have a lot of detractors because I'm a VC, but that's okay.
But do you say, like, I don't care about them?
Yeah,
Okay.
sometimes I will.
Yeah.
But, you know, and it matters to me deeply because every key role that I have gotten was through someone that sponsored me. Someone said, hey, there's this opportunity. And they said, you should talk to Kat. And I wouldn't be in the past 4 seats that I have been in if not for other people speaking well of me in a room that I was not in.
Thank you, Kat. I'd love to get Nate's perspective as a known ally in this community. The first time I met Nate was because he organized a luncheon for female executives in Utah. And I still don't know what your why was for putting that together, but I met a lot of great people there. So I would love to hear from you. Sponsorship, and also, why did you host that lunch?
Great question. We're going to do another one pretty soon, so you'll get an invite to that. I think the why kind of goes back to Allie's comment earlier when she was talking about networking. Like for me, I do love meeting people. I love networking. My comfort zone, I think a lot of our comfort zones are in the circles that we're comfortable with, our neighborhood, banking, right? Maybe your church or whatever. And so important part for me and a challenge for myself when I got to Utah, I've only been here about 6 years, was to get the network outside of my normal circle and just get to know a lot of people. So that was a big part of the why. I thought also an advantage that I had in banking is we have so many clients with so many different C-level women. A lot of them didn't know each other, and a constant theme was, gosh, I'd love to meet more. And so I thought it would be great to use that position I had, knowing many of them and getting them together. Some you knew like pretty much everyone in there, but not a lot of other people knew each other, had heard of each other. So that was a big why. I was kind of passionate around that. Mentorship, sponsorship, I think you guys nailed it. I would just add, maybe a quick story that was a good lesson for me was I had been asked to mentor formally. This was when I was at Wells Fargo. They had a very formal program, and I was mentoring a female banker in a different state. And it was every month we would chat for 3 years. And it was like, what are your goals? Here's how, thoughts on how you're networking, how you're closing deals. And so it was a lot of coaching, right? A lot of feedback, sounding board, but it wasn't, I think someone used the word advocacy. There wasn't like advocacy. But as I got to know her and trust, right, as I saw her through cycles, learning, I was like, gosh, she'd be fantastic in a leadership. And I knew she wanted, because I knew what her career goals was. She wanted to be in a leadership role. She wasn't. And I also said, look, would you be willing to move? She said, I would. So I knew an opportunity that she didn't know about for a big leadership role in Los Angeles. I talked to my peer who was running Southern California and just said, hey, this lady who sits in this other market would be fantastic. So again, the advocacy part was that they didn't know her. And I said, look, she hasn't managed a team. However, because of this, and this, I would be very comfortable, sticking my neck out and saying I think she'd be awesome in this role. And they hired her. This was about a year ago, and it was probably 2 months ago even, because I do stay in contact with a lot of my peers. They said that she's doing fantastic in that market. And so to me, that is, I think the mentorship part is important because it's the coaching, but it's the sponsorship part, which is sticking your neck out, right? Mentioning their name when they're not in that room, saying, hey, I think she would be awesome in this role, and them relying on your, trustworthiness because they may not know that individual as well. And so to me, that's I think the big difference, but I think they also complement each other.
Thank you. Allie, in the first 100 days that someone steps into a C-suite role, what makes the difference between them being successful or not?
The first thing is a plan. They ought to think ahead, like how are they going to tackle those 100 days? I'd break them down into weeks, and then the first thing I do is just go on a listening tour I think building rapport with every colleague at the peer level or above or below, like your team, everybody. You should talk to and listen to everybody. Themes will start to make themselves known. It'll manifest in the dialogue. You'll hear subtext that something that the culture needs or why you're there. And if you can align what they need with your why, you'll be successful. And I think being true to your why is really important. Why are you there? Why would you accept this role? What difference do you want to make? And then getting really clear with whoever you're reporting to. So I report to the CEO. So the first thing I did was create a 100-day plan. In fact, and went in and said, this is what I plan to do, and I want you to hold me accountable for these conversations, and let's talk about what I learned from them. And it actually springboarded into the burning platform for what I needed to accomplish in my first 6 months and then in my first year at the job. So those relationships, getting off on the right foot, was so critical in so many ways because my role was new. I was new. I was the first female executive. I was the risky outlier and had to establish that I was there to meet them where they were. Tried very hard to read the landscape and it reflect back that I was reading correctly. I wasn't showing up in a dress suit and shoes and pumps every day. I work for a company that they're a little more casual, so I was wearing my jeans more often or my Lycra or whatever, just to show them that I can reflect back. I know where I am and what we're about and what matters most.
Thank you, Allie. Kat, we have spoken before because you have been on the committee at least deciding who's the next CEO of companies or who executives are surrounding a CEO that exists. I would love to know from you first, if you can remember what we talked about, what you're looking for in that person to put next to the CEO, and then what makes that person successful in the first 100 days, like Allie was talking about.
I'm trying to remember what I said that day. Oh, yeah. So a COO often. So if you got a CEO in place, if I'm getting involved as a board member, it's probably a COO. And I think a COO is a made-up title most of the time. Really what you're looking for is who can complement the strengths of the CEO with strengths that the CEO doesn't have, right? Like who's going to be the perfect right hand to that CEO's left hand. And rapport, and will they get along, and will they trust each other? And so what I'm analyzing and always pushing the CEO on, especially the stage in which we invest, a lot of times as first-time CEOs, a lot of time when they are under stress, they're like, what does the textbook say I should do when it comes to doing this thing, right? And so my role is like, or put the textbook away, and what do you actually need as a person? And so I'm coaching them all the time to, one, be honest with themselves about where they're strong and where they're weak. I think great CEOs seek truth, great CEOs speak truth, and often the truth is candid and challenging and hard, but what a gift when they can say it well. And if you can seek the truth about yourself, if you can speak the truth about yourself, you're going to be exponentially better when it comes to hiring the right people to put around you. Because the best teams are those, I think, that have complementary strengths to each other, not necessarily the same strengths. And all too often, the biggest risk that comes from an in-network hire is that you're hiring someone that has the same strengths as you. So you're not amending the team with strengths that aren't yet there.
Chelsea, back to the research. What's one true thing about reaching these seats that people avoid saying out loud?
I would say, I'll just quote one of our CEOs. Is that okay? Okay. We kept everything strictly anonymous because we really wanted to be behind the scenes in the rooms that many of us aren't in. And this encapsulates just that hidden part, which was, hey, there were two equally qualified candidates. One was female, one was male. And at the end of the day, we're all just sitting around the table trying to decide who to choose. And the ultimate sentiment was, well, he seems really fun and more easy to work with. And he got the job. And so that's the hard thing that I hate that this is what we found, but what we found, which is there are things like that cultural fit, teamwork and collaborative communication, and that confident presence that are hard to define, and everyone judges it relatively. and it's not transparent and it's not neutral, but that is what we're finding is really that ultimate decision maker. And so I don't want to leave you being like, good luck, no one knows how to define it, and you got to go figure it out, because I think that's the problem. And so, like everyone said here so brilliantly, we want you to be authentic. And if you're in these industries and socialized in these expectations, it's authentic for you to be able to have confident, present, and cultural fit and these other things. So what I'm asking you to do is not to be inauthentic, but there are ways for you to understand a culture better, exactly like Ali said. Figure out their level of formality in clothing and speech and mannerisms. Figure out what's interesting to them in terms of purpose and how does your purpose align with that. Figure out how to have better interpersonal communication. That's something all of us can improve. And then all of us can also work on our public speaking and our body language and our vocal variety and all of these little things that don't make you inauthentic, just make you a better communicator. And we so often work on the skills that we can find on paper and not the skills we can develop in person.
Thank you. Like Kat said, I think that this is part of reading a room as well. Unfortunately, this answer that we heard again and again, cultural fit, is where biases hide. And so what are you going to do to make yourself as easy to work with, as interesting to talk to, as somebody who roots for the same team that they do and has the same hobbies that they do and are the same age, so they like the same music and the same movies, like any of those things that makes someone easy for a person to get along with? What are you going to bring that counteracts that and makes you just as interesting as someone who's exactly like the hiring manager? Sunny, speaking of candor, Sunny is the one who will say it all. What? No, it's just an extension of that. What else do people not say that you have seen? What is something that we only say behind closed doors?
We say a lot of shit. So, like, we say a lot of things. I mean, we all do it, right? You, like, walk around and you're like, oh, he was fun, you know, and, like, or whatever. We always do this. I think the reality is, like, let's see. I remember talking to a VC, and I was talking to him about another founder. And on paper, we were very similar. And I knew, he said, I really like him. He reminds me a lot of me as when I was younger. And I had this epiphany of, there is no way I will remind this guy of him, you know, like a white middle-aged guy. Like we weren't going to have that connection. And there wasn't anything that I could do to like change my physical appearance or anything like that to like map to that. But we could find other ways to connect. And so I had to find out what that was. Just like when I started like in structure, you had 5 engineers, students, and then you had me. And like honestly, for a whole year, all we did was talk about Lost because that was the only thing I could connect with them on.
I did not know you were into Lost.
Well, I was at the I forced myself to, but I think you just have to like find other ways to connect. And I think that like a lot of times we put ourselves, you will walk into every room and you will feel like the only, or that you stand out or you don't fit in. Maybe not today, but like, you know, at other times you will. And I just think that you have to just find other ways to make those connections so that they can get to know you without the biases. And I think that means a lot. And I'm sorry that means like more hard work, but like I do think it's worth it. And I think that you build more meaningful connections that way. But I do, you know, we are going to say stuff. We're going to have our own experiences. We're going to have different understandings of why we feel a certain way about. Sometimes people just give us a bad vibe, you know, or we don't like the way they chew, and you know, and you will drive yourself crazy trying to figure that out from everyone. So I think you just kind of shed what doesn't matter, and if it's not a fit, it's not a fit. You know, I don't want to show up to a place where I feel uncomfortable all the time, or that I have to like be like, it's time for me to play this role, and then like get in my car and then have to be like myself again. That is like mentally and physically exhausting to me to think about doing that. So I'm not going to do that. But I get that, like, when you're walking in, you're just going to, like, read the room. Like, you know, maybe they're not, like, a really fun culture. Maybe they're, like, more serious, or maybe they do these things. But you can, like, go outside of your comfort zone to do a little bit of that, but I don't think change who you are. Yeah, I just don't think that that's a winning strategy going forward.
Like I'm usually the only woman in the room. I'm on a lot of boards. I'm the only female GP, right, in my partnership. And like, you don't have to golf actually. But you know what I'm really good at? Sitting in the cart and making fun of them is they golf. Like, and so it's like, you don't have to do the things that they do. You don't have to like that. If I have to hear one more thing about BYU sports, and I'm going to every Monday for the rest of my life, I swear. But like, I don't care, and they know that I don't care. But you know what I do? I make fun of them as they talk about BYU sports, right? And so it's just like, can they be themselves around you? I think is what is at the heart of that research. It's not, are you a mirror image of them? It's, can they be authentically themselves and create a safe space for you? I think it's really well intended, actually. What's at the heart of that is like, they don't want to, by nature of being themselves, make you feel excluded. And so it's like, how can we create a space where people feel safe being themselves and we get to be ourselves too? And that might mean that you got to go to a lot of golf. Like every executive function was golf. I'm like, I don't care about golf, but I love to sit in the cart and just talk and hang out. And I would even go get a tan. And they knew that that's what I was going to do, right? Gavin, the managing partner and founder of Kickstart, loves one wheel. He loves ping pong. I refuse to do either. I refuse it. I tell the women on the team, like, you don't have to do that, actually. But I'll go and I'll hang out, right? So to me, it's more about the other person is saying that they want to be themselves just as much as you want to be yourself. And I think as we recognize that in each other, we can give a lot of credit in what sounds very daunting and unfair. Because when I hear that, my first instinct is to get very angry. But if you dig into it, it's like, oh, they just want to be themselves too. So.
Thank you, Kim. Let's finish with a 30-second lightning round. So I'm going to have each of you answer this question. What's one thing that the people in this room could do in the next 30 days to improve their path to elevate their careers or get closer to power?
I would say optimize LinkedIn, and not just in posting content, but also reach out to former colleagues. Stay in touch with them. Congratulate them when they get that next job. Make sure that you stay top of mind, and be professional. If it's not on LinkedIn, keep it classy, and have everything you're doing exactly what they said earlier. Have everything that you're putting out into the world building toward a recognition of who are you for someone that has never met you before.
I would say ask better questions. Ask better questions of yourself. Ask better questions of the people who manage you. Ask better questions of your mentors and sponsors. Listen deeply in meetings and ask better questions and follow-up questions. It reflects how you think. It reflects how you articulate concepts and understand difficult questions. And it gives you insight you otherwise wouldn't have. So don't miss the opportunity to ask better questions.
Get outside your comfort zone, meet people outside of your normal circle. This is outside my comfort zone.
You're doing great.
Well, I appreciate it. I have my daughter here today, Naomi, as my support. But doing these types of things, right? Getting out your normal comfort zone is fantastic because you meet people you haven't met before. You learn things you haven't learned before, and you make great connections. So continue to do that.
I would say get to know who you are as a leader. Often I'll find myself pattern matching over this is what a leader is, and I'll lose a part of myself. So I would recommend just sit down, journal. Like, who are you at your best? Who do you want to be as a leader? And maybe even in context of your career. But yeah, who do you want to be? Think deeply about that.
I would say if there's something that you want, whether it's a connection, a relationship, funding, a job, or like a career path, ask for it. Like, put it out there and say, what would it look like for me to go on this path where I could be on the executive team sometime? Or I'm very interested in speaking to you about funding. What are you looking for in companies right now? Like, how active are you? I think you have to put yourself out there and ask those questions and advocate for yourself. It doesn't have to be pushy, like write me a check, but it could be like, hey, Kat, I'm going to be raising money. Where are you at right now with your portfolio? Are you guys, like, with your fund, are you guys writing checks, or what kind of companies? What did that look like? And just putting that intention out there. You're not having to pitch them on the spot, but you're asking questions about them that are going to be very helpful for you to guide the path that you want to take.
I want to close by speaking to two groups of people we have in this room. First of all, to the women, nothing that you heard up here indicates that you have to change who you are to get one of these seats. What it does suggest is that you need to understand the timing, what signals trust, selection, the culture of the company that you're approaching or the board that you're approaching, and that those things matter just as much as performance. And then to the leaders, the investors, and the board members here in the room, pipelines don't fix themselves. Ali said we need more women in the pipeline, and it's true. There need to be more qualified people considered for those top roles. And pathways only widen them when someone in power decides to widen them. So that's my challenge for you. I want to thank all of our panelists for spending time with us today and talking about what it takes to make those decisions and how you can find yourself in those roles. And I want to thank all of you again for making this standing room only. I'm sure the pictures are going to be spectacular. Thank you to Philo Ventures and to Utah Tech Week.